India is the loudest silver buyer on earth right now. And that can mean one of two opposite things. It can mean India is calling the top, the classic late cycle surge where everyone rushes in after the move is already stretched. Premiums spike, then collapse, and the market cools. Or it can mean India is building the floor, the moment when price stops scaring buyers away and starts scaring them into buying. Because the real fear becomes unavailability, not cost. And if you think those two stories cannot both be true, that is exactly why this episode matters. Because India is not one buyer. India is multiple buyer types living in one country, reacting to the same price shock in completely different ways. By the end of this, you will know the exact signals that separate a blow-off from a hoarding floor, and you will have a simple dashboard you can watch in real time so you are not guessing based on vibes and headlines. If you value .com mechanism-based analysis like this, subscribe. This channel is built for long-form clarity, not slogans. And share this with one friend who says India is always late and one friend who says India is the whale, because both of them are going to argue anyway. And at least this will force the argument to touch reality. Now let me set the scene. Imagine a silver market that is not a trading screen first. It is a street, it is a counter, it is a dealer who has to say yes or no with real inventory behind the answer. It is a customer who does not think in charts, but in weight purity, family, tradition, and savings. In India, silver is not only a commodity, it is a habit. It is culture. It is a form of stored value that can feel more tangible than a bank balance. It is also a material used in fabrication and industry. But the thing that makes India such a powerful lens is that the buying is emotional and practical at the same time. That makes India the best laboratory in the world for one question. When silver gets expensive, does demand die? Or does demand become urgent? Because in many places, high prices reduce buying. People postpone. In India, high prices can do that too, but they can also trigger something else. A rush to secure metal before it becomes harder to get, or before it becomes even more expensive, or before a festival window closes, or before social expectations demand that you show up with something tangible. So India is where you can watch demand destruction and hoarding fight each other in the open. Now, here's the part most people get wrong right away. India is often described as a price taker. It does not set the global spot price. That is true in a narrow, formal sense. But India can still become a price driver at the margin, not by controlling a screen, but by draining availability in the channels that matter, then forcing fresh imports, then forcing the rest of the world to compete for the same pool of deliverable metal. That is how a price taker becomes a market mover. Not by voting on the price, but by changing the balance of what is available. So the question is not whether India controls price. The question is whether India is buying in a way that tightens the system or buying in a way that burns hot and fades. And to answer that, we have to stop treating India as one thing. There are at least 3 Indias in silver. There is the festival India, the seasonal surge, the cultural moment when buying precious metals becomes part of the calendar and the social fabric. There is the consumption India, jewelry, silverware, gifts, fabrication, buyers who care about the object and the meaning, not just the metal. And there is the savings India, the investment behavior, the buyer who is not buying a necklace, but buying a form of stored purchasing power. Those 3 Indias do not react the same way to high prices. The festival India can buy because it is time to buy, even if the price is uncomfortable. The consumption India can step back when price shock hits, because the object becomes too expensive. The savings India can step in harder when price shock hits, because the buyer interprets the shock as a warning that the future may be more uncertain, and the metal may become more valuable or harder to secure. This is why you can see headlines that sound contradictory. One report says demand is weak because prices are too high. Another report says demand is strong because buyers are rushing. Both can be true at the same time, in different segments, in different cities, in different buyer types. So how do we tell what is dominant? We watch the one variable that refuses to lie for long. The premium, not the global spot price. The local premium, the extra price paid in India above the expected landed cost when the local market is tight, because the spot price is a global reference. It moves for many reasons. The premium is local truth. It is the cost of getting actual silver into actual hands in that location under those conditions through that supply chain. And premiums tell you what kind of buying is happening. A premium that spikes and collapses quickly can be a burst, a festival wave, a temporary congestion. A premium that stays elevated even after the calendar window ends is something else. It is the market saying tightness is not just excitement. Tightness is structural, at least for now. So before we decide whether India is calling the top or building the floor, we need to understand what makes Indian premiums move. There are the obvious reasons. Inventory depletion. Dealers sell down stock and need replacement metal import timing. Metal takes time to arrive, clear, and distribute. Logistics and financing. Moving and holding inventory has costs, and those costs rise when volatility resists. Fabrication and retail pipeline friction. The local market is not just bars in a vault. It is products, distribution, and risk. Then there is the less obvious reason that matters most: scrap behavior. Scrap is the pressure valve in a healthy, normal market. High prices attract selling. People recycle. They take profit. They bring metal back into the system. That extra supply can cool premiums. But in a hoarding regime, scrap dries up. People do not sell into strength because they do not feel like they are taking profit. They feel like they are losing protection. They hold. They refuse. They wait for even more certainty. Or they wait for a better moment. Or they simply do not want to part with metal that feels like security. When scrap dries up, the market can stay tight even at high prices. So one of the cleanest ways to understand whether India is building a floor is to ask a simple question. At these prices, are holders selling or are holders holding? Now we have to be careful because India can flip between these behaviors, and the flip can happen faster than people expect. That flip is the hoarding switch. In the early stage of a rally, price scares people. They hesitate, they reduce buying. Demand destruction shows up, then something changes. The market becomes more volatile, the news becomes louder, the price makes new highs, and a different fear takes over. The fear becomes not that the metal is expensive, but that the metal will be unavailable, or that it will be even more expensive later, or that waiting is a mistake. That is when high prices stop reducing demand and start accelerating it. This is the most misunderstood phenomenon in precious metals. High prices can become the marketing campaign, not because buyers are irrational, but because buyers are reacting to uncertainty. And uncertainty changes what they optimize for. In calm chimis, buyers optimize for price. In anxious times, buyers optimize for possession. So the question in India right now is not simply whether the price is high. The question is which optimization mode is dominant, price mode or possession mode. If India is in price mode, you should expect volume to soften, buyers to pause, and premiums to struggle to stay elevated once the festival rush fades. If India is in possession mode, you should expect premiums to stay stubborn, restocking to remain aggressive, scrap to remain tight, and the local market to behave like it is still hungry even after the celebration ends. Now let us talk about why this becomes controversial globally. Because India's behavior can look like a signal for everyone else. If India's buying is mostly a late cycle festival surge, it can feel like a top signal. Not because India causes the top, but because it reflects a global mood. When everyone is excited, everyone shows up, and India is visible. If India's buying is a shift into hoarding behavior, it can feel like a floor signal. Because that kind of demand is stickier. It does not disappear when the headlines change. It keeps absorbing supply, which forces the system to respond with new imports and tighter availability. That is why you see people argue the same data as opposite conclusions. One side says India always buys at the top. The other side says India is the floor. What they are really arguing about is whether India is buying like a celebration or buying like insurance. Now let me add one more layer that makes India so important. Currency, local price is not only global silver, it is global silver translated through the local currency environment. When currency weakens, the local price can feel even more extreme. That can intensify demand destruction in consumption segments while intensifying hoarding behavior in savings segments. So India can show you something the global spot chart cannot. You can watch the pressure of local affordability collide with the psychology of local protection. That collision is where the story lives. Now, I want to pause and make a promise to you, because this is where most videos go wrong. Most videos about India and silver become either a hype piece or a sneer. Hype says India is buying everything, therefore silver must explode. Sneer says India is always late, therefore this is the top. Both are illogical. The real answer is conditional. India is calling a top when premiums spike and then collapse, scrap begins flowing, and the savings buyer steps away after the emotional surge. India is building a floor when premiums stay elevated even after the surge, scrap stays tight because holders refuse to sell. Imports have to refuel depleted stock, and the savings buyer remains active. You do not need faith to see it. You need signals. Now we are going to walk into the most important moment in the timeline, the moment after the celebration, the moment after the rush, because the festival window is the easy part to misunderstand. Festival buying front loads demand. It creates temporary congestion. It can create scary premiums. But the real test comes after. When the calendar turns, does the premium collapse? Or does it stay stubborn? That is the fork in the road. And that fork is what tells you whether you just watched a wave or whether you just watched a structural shift in behavior. So in the next part, we are going to do three things. We are going to break down exactly what an India premium is in plain language and why it spikes. We are going to show you what hoarding looks like and what demand destruction looks like and how they can exist at the same time in different segments. And then we are going to give you the simplest real-time checklist you can use to judge whether India is calling the top or quietly building the floor under silver right now. Because the truth is, India is not one signal. India is a tug of war. And the winner of that tug-of-war will tell you more than any loud prediction ever will. And the winner of that tug-of-war is revealed in the weeks after the rush, not during the rush. Because during the festival window, almost everything looks like a shortage. Demand is front-loaded, dealers are busy, inventory is moving fast, and premiums can spike simply because the pipeline cannot keep up with a sudden surge. The real question is, what happens when the calendar stops forcing people to buy? Does the market exhale and normalize, or does it stay tight like a clenched fist? That is what separates a celebration from a regime shift. So let us define the one number that matters most in this entire episode. The India premium. In plain language, it is the extra price paid in India above the expected official domestic rate after you account for global price, currency, import costs, and the normal pipeline. When that premium is small, it means supply is flowing and dealers can get metal without panic. When that premium jumps, it means the local market is tight, not on a spreadsheet, but in real availability. And the reason the premium is such a powerful signal is because it is not opinion, it is the price of friction. It is what people are willing to pay to skip the waiting line. Now, what makes that premium spike? There are 4 common reasons and 1 hidden reason. The first is timing. Imports do not arrive instantly. Orders are placed, shipments move, paperwork clears, and metal gets distributed. When demand surges faster than the arrival schedule, the premium rises. The second is inventory depletion. Dealers do not hold infinite stock. If dealers sell down their shelves and then face the question of replacement. Replacement under volatility is hard, so they raise premiums to manage risk and slow demand to a pace they can handle. The third is pipeline friction. Coins and small bars are not the same as wholesale metal. Even in India, retail product supply can jam. Packaging, fabrication, and distribution create bottlenecks that do not exist in a pure wholesale settlement world. The fourth is financing and volatility. When price is moving fast, holding inventory becomes dangerous. Dealers widen spreads and raise premiums because replacement costs can change overnight. They are pricing uncertainty. Now, here is the hidden reason. Scrap. Scrap is the pressure relief valve that decides whether a premium spike becomes a short fever or a persistent condition. When prices hit records, scrap should, in theory, increase. People should sell old jewelry, old silverware, old holdings, and take profit. That extra metal re-enters a system and cools premiums. That is demand, destruction, behavior, and profit-taking behavior. But in a hoarding mood, scrap does the opposite. Scrap dries up. People refuse to sell because they do not interpret the price as a profit opportunity. They interpret the price as a warning signal. They think, if it is this expensive now, what will it be later? They think, if everyone wants it now, maybe it will be harder to get next. They think, if uncertainty is rising, I do not want to convert my metal into currency. So they hold, and when they hold, the market does not get the relief valve. Without the relief valve, premiums can stay stubborn. This is why the India premium is not just a price. It is a psychological indicator. It tells you whether the crowd is selling into strength or locking metal away. Now, let us address the biggest misconception. People think demand destruction and hoarding are mutually exclusive. They are not. They can happen in different segments at the same time. The consumption buyer can step away because jewelry became unaffordable. The savings buyer can step in harder because metal feels like protection. So you can hear a jeweler say demand is weak, and you can hear a bullion dealer say demand is strong, and both can be telling the truth. The question is, which one dominates the flow? Which one determines whether the market stays tight after the festival? So here is how demand destruction looks in real life. Jewelry volume drops. People browse but do not buy. They trade down to lighter weights. They delay purchases. They switch to alternatives. Dealers report fewer transactions or smaller tickets. Scrap starts to appear because people are tempted by the high price. Premiums, after the rush, collapse back toward normal because the pipeline catches up and the urgency fades. That is a top-style behavior. Not because it guarantees the global top, but because it shows the local market cannot sustain the elevated urgency at those price levels. Now here is how hoarding looks in real life. Premiums remain elevated even when the festival calendar is behind us. Dealers keep restocking and still report tightness. Scrap stays oddly quiet because holders do not want to sell. Investment flows remain active through formal channels where people can buy easily. And the most important tell of all is this. When price dips, buying accelerates instead of fading. In a hoarding regime, dibs are not relief. Dibs are invitations. That is a floor-building behavior. Now, let us connect this to the global Silvis story so you understand why this is controversial. If India is in demand destruction mode, its buying can cool, imports can ease, premiums can normalize, and the global market loses one source of visible urgency. That can contribute to a pullback, especially if global sentiment is already fragile. If India is in hoarding mode, its buying does not cool. It stays persistent. It forces new imports and absorbs supply faster than the system expects. That can keep the global market tighter at the margin. even if other regions are softer. This is why India is so powerful as a signal. It is not because India sets the chart. It is because India reveals what people do when faced with price shock in a culture where precious metals are not only luxury, but identity and savings behavior. Now we arrive at the decision framework you came for. This is the checklist that tells you whether India is calling the top or building the floor. If India is calling the top, you tend to see this sequence. Premiums spike during the rush, then collapse quickly once the rush ends. Scrap begins flowing because holders decide the price is too good to ignore. Dealers report that customers are hesitating and volumes drop. Investment flows cool as people step back to wait for stability. In this sequence, India's surge looks like a front-loaded celebration that burns hot and then fades. If India is building the floor, you tend to see a different sequence. Premiums spike during the rush, and then they stay stubborn even after the calendar turns. Scrap stays tight because holders refuse to sell even at record prices. Dealers keep ordering and still report tightness. Investment buying remains active and dips get bought aggressively. In this sequence, India's behavior looks like insurance buying, not celebration buying. Now, here's the part that makes this episode uncomfortable. Both sequences can start the same way. Both start with a rush. That is why people get fooled. So the only time you should draw a conclusion is after the rush. The after is the signal. Now, because we are not here to pretend we have certainty, we need a countercase that keeps you from getting drunk on the India narrative. The countercase says the festival premium can be seasonal and temporary, and it can look enormous without being sustainable. It says record local prices can shock consumers and reduce the consumption segment. It says India can cool quickly once the rush is satisfied, because many purchases were pulled forward. That countercase is real, which is why the best way to use India is not as a prophecy, but as a live dashboard. You watch whether premiums remain sticky. You watch whether scrap reappears. You watch whether buying returns on dips. Watch whether imports have to accelerate to refill depleted stocks. Now let us bring this home with a line that will make the whole episode memorable. India is not one signal. India is two machines running at the same time. A festival machine that front-loads demand, and a savings machine that buys on fear. The festival machine can mark a peak. The savings machine can build a floor. The only way to know which machine is winning is to watch what happens when the celebration ends. Now, if this episode helped you see that difference, subscribe. This channel is building a complete map of silver drivers without turning everything into a slogan. And share it with a friend who thinks India is always late or always the whale, because both are oversimplified. And now I want the comments, because the comments are the laboratory for this exact debate. Do you think India is calling the top at these prices or building the floor? If you are in India, what are you actually seeing on the ground right now? Are premiums still stubborn? Are dealers still tight? Are people selling scrap? Or are they holding? If you are outside India, do you think Indian buying matters more than Western flows or less? And the most important question of all, when price dips, do you buy or do you wait? Because the answer to that question is what decides whether the market is in price mode or possession mode. And that is the real story